My name is Kate, and I've been a police officer for over a decade. The precinct was my home, my colleagues were my family, and the relentless pursuit of justice was my purpose. Life was straightforward until I met Michael. He was everything I didn't know I was looking for. Charming, kind, and incredibly supportive of my demanding career. Our first meeting was nothing short of unconventional. It was at a charity event for the local police force. I was in uniform representing our department. "Excuse me, officer," he approached me with a confident smile. "Could you tell me more about what you do? I've always been fascinated by law enforcement." His genuine interest caught me off guard, really. "Most people usually just ask if I've ever shot someone," I replied, half joking. He laughed. "No, I'm interested in the real work you do, the stuff that matters." We talked for hours that night, about everything from police work to our favorite movies. He wasn't intimidated by my job, and I wasn't put off by his curiosity. It was a connection neither of us expected. Michael introduced me to his mother, Martha, a few months into our relationship. I could tell from our first meeting that she didn't approve of me. "You're a police officer, dear?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. "That's a rather dangerous job for a young lady." "It's my passion, ma'am," I replied, trying to stay polite. Interesting," she said, her eyes narrowing. "I hope you won't put my son in any danger." "Mom, Kate's job is something to be proud of," Michael interjected. Sensing the tension, "She's making a real difference." Despite Martha's reservations, Michael and I fell deeply in love. We were a team, and nothing seemed to stand in our way. But looking back, I realized that Martha's initial attitude was a sign of things to come. Her dislike for me was not a passing judgment, but a deep-seated resentment that would later turn my life into a living nightmare. We planned our wedding with excitement, choosing the perfect venue, the most beautiful flowers, and inviting all our friends and family. But in the back of my mind, Martha's cold gaze lingered. I brushed it off as mere nerves, not realizing that the wedding was only the beginning of a dark chapter in my life. Michael and I were about to embark on a journey that would test us in ways we never anticipated. The fancy wedding, the love we shared, all of it was about to be overshadowed by a secret that would shake our very foundation. In this struggle, my experience as a police officer would prove invaluable, but it would also expose the cracks in my relationship that I never knew existed. But all of that was still ahead of me, waiting to unfold on the very day I thought would be the happiest of my life. The day had finally come. After months of planning, it was time for Michael and me to say our vows. The excitement in the air was palpable, yet so was the tension. My uniform was replaced by a beautiful white gown, but my instincts as a police officer never left me. I could sense something was amiss, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The church was decorated with delicate white roses, and the soft glow of the candles created a magical atmosphere. Our friends and family were all there, beaming with joy, but Martha's eyes were like ice. "Kate, you look stunning! My best friend and fellow officer Sarah!" exclaimed as she helped me with my veil. "Thank you, Sarah. I just wish I could shake this weird feeling about Martha," I confessed. "Don't let her ruin your day. Focus on Michael and the love you two share," she reassured me. The ceremony was breathtaking. Michael looked dashing, and as we exchanged our vows, I could see the love in his eyes. "I promise to stand by you to support you and to love you unconditionally," Michael declared, his voice filled with emotion. "I promise to be your partner in all things, to face challenges together and to love you with all my heart," I replied, tears welling in my eyes. We sealed our promises with a kiss, and the congregation erupted into cheers. But Martha's applause was weak, her smile forced. I could see her whispering to Michael's sister, but I tried to ignore it. At the reception, the tension became unbearable. Guests were dancing and enjoying themselves, but Martha's presence loomed large. I decided to confront her. "Martha, is everything all right? You seem uncomfortable," I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked me up and down, her lips curling into a sneer. "Oh, I'm fine, dear. Just wondering what my son sees in a police officer like you." I was taken aback by her bluntness, but managed to reply, "I love your son, Martha, and he loves me. That's all that matters." "Is it?" she shot back, her voice dripping with disdain. "I just hope you don't drag him into your dangerous world." "Mom, enough!" Michael intervened, his voice firm. Martha just huffed and walked away, leaving us both stunned. The rest of the evening was a blur. The toasts, the dancing, even cutting the cake felt overshadowed by Martha's cold attitude. Michael tried to lift my spirits, but I couldn't shake the feeling that our marriage had started on a sour note. That night, as we left for our honeymoon, I looked back at the beautiful venue, and all I could see was Martha's cold eyes, filled with disapproval. The woman, who was now my mother-in-law, had made her feelings clear, and I knew that our future together would be anything but smooth. Our wedding was supposed to be the beginning of our happily ever after, but instead it had sown the seeds of a battle I never expected to fight, a battle that would test my love, my integrity, and my strength as a police officer, a battle that had only just begun. Moving in with Martha was a decision born out of necessity, not desire. Michael's father had passed away a few years ago, and he felt obligated to take care of his mother. But from the very first day, I realized that living under the same roof as Martha was going to be far from easy. The house itself was beautiful, filled with memories of Michael's childhood, but those memories were overshadowed by Martha's dominating presence. She had a way of making everything about herself, turning even the most trivial tasks into a battleground. "Kate, why is this house such a mess? Clean it up," she'd yell early in the morning, startling me out of sleep. "I'm doing my best, Martha." "Michael and I are both working, and we can't be here all the time," I'd reply, trying to keep my cool. "That's no excuse. This house used to be spotless when my husband was alive," she'd retort, her eyes filled with reproach. The situation escalated quickly. Martha's demands grew more unreasonable, her criticism more biting. My police training had prepared me for criminals, but nothing could prepare me for Martha's relentless onslaught. "What's this, Kate? A microwave dinner. My son deserves better," she'd complain, throwing the food into the trash. "Martha, I just worked a 12-hour shift. I'm doing the best I can," I'd argue, my patience wearing thin. "You call this your best? Pathetic," she'd snap, leaving the room in a huff. Michael tried to intervene, to stand up for me, but his attempts were in vain. His love for his mother clouded his judgment, and he often ended up caught in the crossfire. "Mom, please, let's be reasonable. Kate's doing a lot for this family. You need to appreciate her efforts," he'd plead. "I'll appreciate her when she starts acting like a proper wife," Martha would retort, her voice dripping with contempt. Our marriage, once filled with love and understanding, was slowly crumbling under Martha's relentless pressure. We began to argue not about us, but about her. Martha became the invisible third person in our relationship, a wedge driving us apart. The days turned into a nightmare, a never-ending cycle of demands, arguments, and tears. My strength as a police officer seemed useless against Martha's emotional manipulation. She had a way of making me feel small, inadequate, and worthless. And yet, I persevered. I loved Michael, and I wanted our marriage to work. But the strain was taking its toll on both of us. Our home, once a sanctuary, had become a battlefield. As the weeks wore on, I knew something had to give. I couldn't continue living this way, walking on eggshells, constantly fearing Martha's next outburst. I needed to take control, to stand up for myself, and to fight back. But the biggest battle was still ahead of me, a discovery that would turn my world upside down and set me on a path I never expected to walk. Living with Martha was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about family, love, and justice. I was a police officer, trained to face danger and adversity, but nothing in my career had prepared me for the battle within my own home. A battle that was about to take a dark and unexpected turn. It was a day like any other in Martha's house, tense, exhausting, and filled with a never-ending list of chores. Michael was at work, and I was cleaning up after another one of Martha's tirades. "You missed a spot, Kate," she'd say, pointing at a barely notable mark on the floor. "You're really slipping." "I'm doing my best, Martha," I'd respond through gritted teeth, my patience running thin. "Your best isn't good enough," she'd retort, her voice dripping with disdain. It was while cleaning the kitchen in a cupboard that Martha always kept locked that I stumbled upon something that made my heart stop. I'd accidentally knocked over a jar, and behind it, hidden from view, was a small package wrapped in plastic. Curiosity piqued. My instincts as a police officer kicked in. I carefully unwrapped the package and found drugs. A substantial amount. My blood ran cold. "What's that you have there, dear?" Martha's voice rang out from behind me, a hint of panic in her tone. "Martha, what is this? Why are there drugs in your cupboard?" I demanded, holding up the package. "That's none of your business, you nosy girl," she snapped, her face turning red with rage. "How dare you snoop around my house?" "Your house? We live here too, and having drugs in the house is everyone's business. I shot back, anger bubbling up inside me. You don't understand, and you never will. You're a disappointment to this family because you're a police officer. You should leave this house and never come back, Martha yelled, her voice filled with venom. I was stunned, the words cutting me to the core. Martha, I can't ignore this. I have to report it, I said, my voice trembling. Go ahead. Ruin our family. You've already taken my son from me. Why not destroy everything else? She screamed, tears streaming down her face. My hands shaking, I called Michael and told him what I had found. He was as shocked as I was, but he stood by me. Kate, you have to do what's right. We can't ignore this. It's painful, but we have to face it, he said, his voice filled with anguish. That night, I reported the discovery to my precinct. The wheels of justice began to turn, and I knew that our lives would never be the same again. The discovery of the drugs was more than a betrayal. It was a declaration of war. Martha had drawn a line in the sand, and I had no choice but to cross it. Our home was no longer a battlefield. It was a war zone. A war between family and duty, love and justice. A war that was about to reach its tipping point. I was no longer just a daughter-in-law caught in a family feud. I was a police officer, sworn to uphold the law. A law that had been broken by the very person I had tried so hard to please. The storm had been brewing for a long time, and now it was about to break. The battle with Martha was far from over. It was only just beginning. Revenge is a word that had never resonated with me. As a police officer, my job was to protect and serve, to uphold the law without personal bias. But Martha's betrayal had turned my world upside down. It was not just an offense against the law, it was a personal affront. Her constant berating, her hidden secrets, and her unfounded hatred had pushed me to a place I never thought I'd find myself. A place where justice and revenge intertwined. After I reported the discovery to my superiors, an investigation was launched. My colleagues were supportive but wary, understanding the complexity of prosecuting a family member. Are you sure about this, Kate? This could get ugly, my partner, James, warned. I know, but I can't ignore it. This is about more than just Martha. It's about what's right, I replied, determination in my voice. The day finally arrived when the police came to our house. The look on Martha's face when they handcuffed her was a mixture of shock and defiance. Her eyes met mine, filled with accusation. You've destroyed this family, Kate. I hope you're happy, she spat, venom in her voice. I did what I had to do. You brought this on yourself, I retorted, my voice steady but my heart aching. Michael stood by me, his face pale and his eyes filled with a sadness I hadn't seen before. I love you, Kate, and I trust you, but this is tearing me apart, he whispered, tears in his eyes. I know, Michael, but we have to do what's right, even when it hurts, I said, holding him close. The trial was a drawn-out, agonizing process. Every day, I was torn between the principles I had sworn to uphold as a police officer and the pain it was causing my family. The courtroom was filled with tension, with Martha's cold eyes constantly fixed on me, her glare filled with accusation. The prosecution laid out the evidence methodically, detailing the amount of drugs found in Martha's possession and the circumstances of their discovery. Officer Kate Thompson, could you please describe the day you found the illegal substances in Mrs. Martha Thompson's cupboard? The prosecutor asked, his voice firm. I was cleaning the kitchen and I stumbled upon the drugs hidden behind a jar, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I knew what it was, and I knew I had to report it. How did Mrs. Thompson react when you confronted her? He continued. She was angry and told me it was none of my business. She yelled at me, told me I was a disappointment, and asked me to leave the house, I recounted, tears welling in my eyes. The defense attorney was ruthless in cross-examination, twisting my words, trying to paint me as a vengeful daughter-in-law. Isn't it true, Officer Thompson, you never got along with Mrs. Thompson? That you had a motive to frame her, he asked, his voice dripping with insinuation. No, that's not true. I tried to get along with her. I found the drugs by accident, not out of malice, I protested, my voice rising. Objection, Your Honor. Leading the witness, the prosecutor interjected. Overruled. Continue, the judge said, his face stern. The trial continued with witnesses and experts testifying, each day becoming a blur of legal jargon and emotional turmoil. Michael was called to the stand, and his testimony was heartbreaking. Mr. Thompson, how would you describe your mother's relationship with your wife? The defense attorney asked, his voice soft. It was difficult. My mother never accepted Kate, but that doesn't mean she's guilty of this crime, Michael replied, his voice breaking. Did you ever witness any friction between them? Any arguments? The defense pressed on. Yes, they argued, but that doesn't make my wife a liar. She's an honorable police officer, and she did what she thought was right, Michael said, his voice filled with conviction. The closing arguments were passionate, both sides making their case. The jury deliberated, and the waiting was excruciating. The fear that Martha might be acquitted weighed heavily on me. Finally, the verdict came. Guilty. Martha's face was ashen as the judge handed down the sentence. Mrs. Thompson, you have been found guilty of possession with intent to distribute. You are hereby sentenced to 1 year in prison, he declared, his voice unwavering. As the gavel fell, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but the cost was high. My marriage was strained, my trust in family shattered. I hope you're happy now, Martha whispered as she was led away, her eyes filled with hatred. I did what I had to do, I replied quietly, my heart heavy. The trial was over, but the scars it left were deep and lasting. The path to healing was long and uncertain, and I knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But I also knew that I had done the right thing, and that knowledge was a beacon of hope in the darkness. It was a reminder that justice, no matter how painful, was a value worth fighting for.